Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My name's Stephen Jameson. I'm the head of training with Copters, and welcome to this webinar. Subject this evening: you're a drone pilot. Now what? Some of you may already be flying and running your own business. Others of you will be have a brand new qualification to fly and trying to decide what to do with that qualification. Hopefully the next hour or so will help. There's myself and one of my instructor examiner colleagues on this call, and he'll introduce himself shortly, as will I properly. Starting a drone business or seeking employment, flying a drone can be a bit daunting. I sympathize. I basically faced the exact same dilemma about 12 months ago when I effectively changed career. I'll mention a bit more of that later. So I've gone through the same process, and hopefully we can help you all this evening. A little bit of housekeeping. You'll probably, for those of you that have attended a few webinars today already, you'll have seen this slide before. To the right is a sidebar. On the sidebar, you've got a few different things you can select: chat and questions. Feel free to use the chat and chat amongst yourselves. We're not monitoring that, so you can say whatever you want, and obviously touch base with others on this webinar. If you have any questions that you want us to answer, however, if you could use the questions tab, so literally just click on the questions tab, type your question, ping it in, and either we'll cover it during the presentation or we'll get to it at the end, and we should have plenty of time at the end for questions. So feel free to ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So ask away at any point during the presentation. Okay, moving on. As I said, my name's Stephen Jameson. My colleague is Harry Crawford. Harry, perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Harry Crawford. I'm one of the instructors at Copters. So my main role is obviously teaching the GVC and the A2 CFC course. So spend a lot of time kind of developing those courses, but also out in front of people, delivering them, going through some of the flight coaching as well. So actually working on kind of people's flying abilities and helping them gain enough knowledge and skill to pass their practical flight assessment if they go on to the GVC. And then I also do quite a lot of bespoke training as well on different products that we sell. So I'll go out to the police, MOD, loads of different companies and do specific training for things like the Loki 2, which is one of our internal drones that public safety are using to kind of clear out rooms and do internal inspections. Then I'll do a little bit on the Elios as well for internal inspection, and then obviously a lot of the DJI and Parrot kit for the outdoor utilities, inspection, photography, everything kind of around there. So quite a varied role. I've got about 5 years experience in the drone industry, starting off more retail based, then moving into a role that was more towards speccing out aircraft and basically designing systems that can be integrated into different companies, doing various different various different industries, doing various different jobs, and then moved to Copters about 1.5 years ago and started as an instructor, and absolutely loved it since. Obviously it's brilliant getting to meet loads of different people, working with loads of different industries, and obviously flying loads of different aircraft as well. So what we're going to be doing today, as Stephen said, just discussing what we can do now that we've got our GVC qualifications and how we can enhance that to kind of stand apart from the crowd a little bit.
Brilliant. Thanks, Harry. Yeah, as I mentioned before, my name's Stephen Jameson. I'm recently joined Copters head of training. My background's a little bit different. Obviously, you can tell I'm a little bit older than Harry. I was a commercial pilot background, basically. So I started flying when I was about 20. I've done 30 years or so of flying, 14 years for the airlines and 17 years flying large cabin exec jets. And the last 17 or 18 years, mostly training, what they call in the airline industry, a type rating instructor, type rating examiner. So teaching people to fly aeroplanes, types of aeroplanes, such as Gulfstreams or whatever. And also most of that 18 years in management as well, a variety of roles, director of training, director of flight ops, and various other things, accountable manager, etc. So I stopped flying a couple of years ago. Wasn't really sure what to do. Spent a year or so with the Irish Coast Guard, running their search and rescue, and then found my way into drones just out of interest, really, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So I've decided that a year or so ago that drones were where it was for me. Set up my own drone business, so I've been and still have that. So probably quite similar to yourselves from that perspective. Went through the dilemma of what to do and how to do it, and obviously got the opportunity to join Copters as an instructor examiner, and but pretty shortly thereafter was asked if I would take on the head of training role, which I'm doing now. So anyway, that's me. So yeah, thoroughly enjoying Copters, and we've got a great team of instructors and examiners, and yeah, looking forward to the next for the next few years until I actually eventually retire altogether. So okay, moving on. I guess the first question with this is, what do you want to do? The drone industry is going through a massive expansion at the moment, as Harry intimated there. A lot of companies are getting into using drones. Maybe there's been some resistance in the past, but drones now are becoming so capable. And, you know, for example, with surveying, you know, a few years ago, you were fairly limited as to what you could do. Nowadays, you know, with 5 centimeter tolerances, you know, using a drone rather than an aircraft or ground surveying is, you know, absolutely possible, and a lot of companies are taking that on board. But if you haven't quite decided what you want to do with your life in the drone world, then obviously certainly our company can help. And if you go to the Copters website, which I'm sure you can find if you've just done the training, if you click on the industry tab at the top, there's a drop-down menu with a whole variety of different things you can do, be it inspection, survey, public sector, etc., etc., etc. You can go into those individual tabs, look at what's involved, and also at Copters we're quite unique in that we have a bunch of specialists, what we call UAV strategists, whose job is to look after individuals and corporate customers to make sure that they have the right equipment, and to help them set up their drone organization or operation or business as they wish to. So lots of good advice. The advice is free. Obviously, you may want to buy some products eventually, but the advice is free. Also, we obviously have at Copters we have a lot of additional training that we can offer, and we'll get onto that in a moment. But you know, feel free to go on the website, and you know, if you're interested in a particular thing, be it as I said, a state agency or surveying or whatever, then feel free to contact the specialist UAV strategist, and he can give you advice on how to get started, what sort of drones you should be looking at, etc., etc. So, okay, moving on. Okay, Copters Academy, both myself and Harry work for the training side of Copters, which we call Copters Academy. So we do specialize in the commercial side of drone training generally, although obviously we do standard A2 CFC and GVC training as well. We obviously run one of the UK's largest and leading drone training academies. We deliver training to lots of individuals, but a lot of companies as well, and overall I believe we're delivering training now to over 1,000 companies and organizations, including local authorities, police, fire, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, that we've got quite a lot of experience in delivering expert or specialist training. Obviously, if you do training with us, in addition to the A2 CFC and GVC, then we can offer a lot of different courses. The GVC itself is Ofqual 4, which, as I'm sure you know, is kind of an HNC level qualification. But beyond that, if you're going to be running a drone department, for example, with a number of drone pilots, then you could be interested in the Chief Pilot's course, which would be is an Ofqual 5 course, which is effectively equivalent to a foundation degree. But we do lots of industry-specific courses as well, such as thermography, extended visual and beyond visual line of sight will come in the next few months. Obviously, we're in the process of setting that course up with the CAA, but we already do 3D mapping and a variety of other industry and type specific courses. So if you want a course specifically for a Matrice 300, then we can do that. In addition to the online training, we regularly run closed classroom courses for the police or local authority, water board, etc., various water boards. That's showing my age there. But water companies, you know, that are setting up drone teams, and you know, that allows us to visit, you know, the customer on site and deliver industry specific and type specific training to larger groups of people at their own locations. So that is something we can do as well. Additional training accreditation, you can look at this on the website, but basically we pretty much do a big raft. I've mentioned most of them already, but A2 CFC, GVC, which is Ofqual 4, type and task specific training and support to industrial users. And we also offer some generic courses such as commercial surveying, UAV surveying, thermography, 3D mapping, Pix4D, for example, and as well as some of the other courses I've already mentioned. So feel free to have a look on the website, the training brochure, if you feel. The more training you get, the more qualifications you get, then the more you stand out from the crowd. There's no doubt about that. So I think you know, that's certainly been, you know, from my experience in the airline industry before this, you know, having extra qualifications never does you any harm. And, you know, it gives you a level of credibility over and above the standard A2 CFC or GVC course. Okay, moving on. Just a little bit about the Chief Drone Pilot's course, and I'll hand over to Harry because you know, he's been involved in this more than I have. You're on mute, Harry.
Sorry, left myself on mute there. So yeah, with the Ofqual 5, the Chief Pilot Award, this is something that I actually did when I started at Copters. So obviously I'd worked within the drone industry for quite a while, had a fair bit of knowledge. But I mean, the kind of knowledge that you gain from the Ofqual 5 just brings that kind of above and beyond level. And to be honest with you, it's probably not a course that's for everyone, but anyone who is working for a large drone company and wants to kind of put themselves ahead of the rest, or if you're setting up on your own and you're looking into potentially getting yourself some extended permissions or an operational safety case in order to operate even closer to people, or in specific circumstances that our standard permission won't, it can be really, really valuable. It runs through quite a vast syllabus, really. When we ran it as a classroom course, it was about a 5-day course, so it was actually longer than kind of what we do for the GVC and the A2 courses. But there's just so much relevant knowledge in there. It even goes into speaking about how you could potentially plan operations for EV loss or extended visual line of sight, and then goes into BV loss as well. And the course was developed by one of our instructors who has had a huge kind of involvement with BV loss and actually done quite a lot of BV loss flying through the military, and obviously all that knowledge has been brought and put into the course, and it's kind of got loads of different experience and use cases in there as well. It even kind of goes into the detail of planning how you might do a job. So there's like a practical assignment that goes into that. Yeah, so kind of a really extensive course, and like I say, not for everyone, but if you're in a large company and you're wanting to kind of position yourself as that chief pilot, it's going to give you all those skills in order to kind of plan the operations, plan the safety side of things, and kind of look in how you can manage your team, but also increase the efficiency of the operations. So really valuable course there.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Harry. Yeah, as Harry said, that type of course isn't for everybody. If you're a one-man band, if you like, you might still find it useful, but depending on what you're doing. But certainly if you're running a drone team of 10 or 20 pilots, then obviously there's an awful lot of regulatory requirements that come with being an operator of that complexity, and this obviously would help. Okay, moving on. Professional development, maintenance of skills, and flying currency. I speak to a lot of people, and the flying game, whether it's drones or manned aircraft, is the same. Obtaining your qualification is the beginning of your learning journey, not really the end. It's a bit like getting your first driving license. You know, getting your driving license, I would say at the time you pass your test, you certainly don't know it all. And I would say after 30 years messing around with airplanes, you know, I definitely don't know it all. Every day's a learning day, and drones are exactly the same. So I think you know, there are a few little rules that I would actually throw in, and so when you do start flying, you know, think safety. You know, we always need to assess and minimize and mitigate risk. So, you know, it's not the first thing on our mind. The first thing on our mind, you know, ordinarily or naturally might be getting the job done, but you know, if you don't do that safely and you have an incident, then that turns a good day into a very bad day. So, you know, you should always be thinking along that line. The other thing is practice. It's very easy once you get your qualification in the bag to turn around and for want of a better words, be a little bit lazy, and you know, practice, I wouldn't say ever makes perfect, because I don't think perfect exists, but certainly makes better. And you know, it does take practice. Flying drones is a skill, and you know, if you don't use skills, they fade. So you need to practice, and practice regularly. Practice the use of automation, practice the use of manual flying skills. And the number of times I hear of people saying, oh, the drone did this or the drone did that, or I lost control, or it flew away all on its own, or whatever. Many times it could have been avoided, you know, and you know, just knowing how to handle the drone, being practiced in the use of its systems is very important. You know, if you get airborne and you want to fly the drone at 100 meters and you set it to 10 meters instead, then press the automatic launch button, then the chances are it might get about 10 meters and hit a house or something, which turns a good day into a very bad day. 9 times out of 10, of course, that's just a lack of practice, a lack of skill, and a lack of knowledge on how your drone works. So practice regularly, automation and manual. Remain current with regular flying training, and practice the non-GPS assisted modes if your drone has those. I know not all drones have the likes of ATI or angle mode, but you know, when you do lose GPS and the thing starts to drift, then you know, best to be practiced in how to fly it in those modes. So that's,
yeah, I mean,
you know, something very important. Harry?
Sorry to interrupt you there. I was just going to say that that's something that we kind of stress quite a lot, especially going through the course. But even kind of internally for us, we do a lot of GPS flying, and we become quite reliant on that. And I think it happens for quite a lot of pilots, really, and especially with like the new Mavics that have been brought out that don't have the capability to go into ATI mode. It's really important that we kind of jump on and practice with aircraft that we can, or that do have that capability. a lot of the pilots within Copters will buy smaller drones that either don't have GPS or have the ability to kind of jump into an ATI mode, and we'll just practice kind of flying either indoor or outdoor with that. And it's just so useful to have that skill. A lot of pilots won't practice it and then get themselves in a situation, like Stephen was saying, where they don't have control of the aircraft and they don't have the capability to actually bring the aircraft back into control whilst it's in ATI mode. And what we forget sometimes is, although we might not have a switch to switch the aircraft into ATI mode, it's still got the capability to be in it if it was to lose GPS. So really important to practice that one.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good point. You know, we hear that a lot. You know, well, my aircraft doesn't have ATI mode. Well, you know, you can get a one that does relatively cheaply, very cheaply, in fact. You know, and it's worth staying in that sort of practice, because, you know, flying when you don't have GPS stabilization and the thing's drifting away, it is a different skill. And it's something that you need to stay on top of. The other thing is refreshing your technical knowledge. Yet again, it's quite easy to get lazy once you get bogged down in the process of working for a living with your drone. But you do need to stay on top of your aircraft knowledge and limitations. I mean, most of the limitations are there for a reason. If you exceed the wind limits, no matter what you do, the drone's not coming back to you. So you know, follow the limitations, stick to it, make sure you know them. Operating knowledge, how to best operate that drone. As I said, the conditions that you can operate the drone in, emergency procedures, what happens if your GPS does fail and the aircraft starts to fly away. You know, there was an accident report that we were reading the other day, and we use on one of our training courses, which involved a Matrice 300 drifting away in ATI mode, basically, and hitting a house and ending up upside down in somebody's back garden. And the aircraft was perfectly controllable throughout. The only thing it lost was GPS, and the pilots never ever switched to ATI mode and tried to regain control. So it's very important that you think about what's going to happen when that, you know, if you do lose that capability, how are you going to correct it? How are you going to get control of the aircraft and do something about it? And of course, regulatory requirements and changes. And you know, somebody like Copters can help you there as well. You know, if you train with us, then obviously you enter a long-term relationship with us, hopefully, and you know, we can help with a lot of these things. When you're talking, I see we've got a few questions already about different sectors, and we'll come to those later on. But utilize the support of the Copters industry specialists. You know, I mean, that's what they're there for. Most of them do fly drones themselves. They have GVC or PFCO qualifications, but what they do know is the industries that they specialize in, and they know what it takes to build a business in those industries. They know the equipment that you should be looking at, any additional training you need, and use those resources available to you to develop your skill sets and the capabilities of your business. The more capable the business and the more you appear to be capable, then the more work you're going to get, the more successful your business is going to be. So
yeah, and
bear in mind. Go ahead, Harry.
Sorry, going back to kind of the industry specialists, the guys that we've got internally, they've got so much knowledge in their areas. I mean, I go out and do quite a lot of demos with these guys, so I'll be flying and kind of listening into what they're talking about, like the likes of George and Jim, Sam. The knowledge that they've kind of gathered in their areas specifically is absolutely amazing. So if you've got any questions at all, especially like with Jim on the surveying side, Jim actually used to be a surveyor before he worked at Copters. So the knowledge that he's got when it comes to using aircraft in that specific area is just incredible. And the same with George and Sam in their specific areas. They've just got so much knowledge, so really utilize that. Ask as many questions as you can, and obviously try and benefit as much as you can from that knowledge.
Yeah, and I would second that. I mean, the reason I'm at Copters personally is because when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with drones, I attended all the Copters webinars with the same guys, the UAV strategists, and took on all of the advice that was on offer, and decided, well, you know, what to do. And basically, see, somebody's asked a question about working in the agricultural sector. I have a background as well in the long, dim and distant past before I started flying in civil engineering and surveying. So I set up a business doing agricultural survey and things, and topographical survey. So exactly, but you know, the guys can give you so much good advice, you know, the right drones to have, you know, how to set up, workflows, you name it, you know, it's all there. So yeah, as I said, most of that, or virtually all of that, advice is free, so feel free to utilize it. The guys love to talk drones, all of them, every single one of them, and particularly if you're talking drones a bit within their specific specialty. So yeah, use them. Okay, other ways of building your business. I mean, the best way building your business is obviously to get out there, word of mouth, do good work, and actually get recommended. However, there are other associations and professional bodies that you can use. I've listed a couple here, but there are lots, and a few that pop up. A few different ones pop up all the time. The two big ones are probably the RPAS UK and the Drone Safe Register. Useful for maybe getting initial business, but just anyway, have a look at them, see if it suits you, see if it's something that you might want to use. A lot of it depends what sort of business you're going into. So, I mean, if you're doing roof inspections or estate agency work, you might do well out of these associations. Obviously, you know, some of the more specialty things, you know, maybe not so much. It's not going to generate so much business for you, but certainly have a look and you know, see if it's any use to you. So, okay, moving on. I think that's it. Yeah, so Q&As. So we're about half an hour in, so we can start to work through some of the questions. So yeah, Harry, I think you've probably been paying more attention to the questions than me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll jump on, just kind of start from the bottom. We can work our way up there.
Yeah.
Like Steve says, we've got kind of half an hour to run through loads of questions, open up the topics, and kind of discuss them in a little bit more detail as well. So should be good fun. First question we've got is from Raj. Can you explain the difference between the GVC and the other course, which I'm assuming is the A2 CFC? I mean, it's obviously not quite as clear cut as it used to be with the PFCO, or the legislation previous to this year, where you could essentially define yourself as either being a hobbyist or a commercial pilot. If you were a hobbyist, you didn't really have to pay much attention to getting certified, although you'd have to still abide by certain rules. And obviously, if you were a commercial pilot, you'd have to go through the process of getting your certificates through an NQE or somewhere like Copters, and then applying for your permission from the CAA. So now it's looked at as more of a well, it's more classified on the safety and the risk of the operation. So the lower risk, the less training and the less kind of qualifications you need, and obviously the higher the risk, the higher qualification standards you need. And it's kind of done by that now. If you're a hobbyist, there may be situations where you still need to get certified, and if you're a commercial pilot, there may be situations where you don't need to be certified. So quite confusing, bit of a minefield. But yeah, I mean, I'll go through basically what the main differences are for the GVC and the A2 CFC. So the GVC is for anyone who wants to operate kind of within a congested area with an aircraft which is potentially going to cause more risk to people when they're operating. So if you're flying any of the bigger aircraft, if we think about the Inspires, the majority of all of the Matrice products, any of the larger Parrot drones like the Anafi USA, or any drone that's kind of above 2 or 4 kilograms, you're going to have to kind of look at getting mainly your GVC. If you're wanting to operate in a less risky area, so if you, let's say we're 150 meters away from a congested area, everywhere is kind of cordoned off, we've got no people in the area, that's when you can operate within the open category under the A2 CFC. Even with some of these larger drones, as long as you're far from people, you can still operate there. The A2 CFC, or the open category, is kind of split into three now. So we've got a low risk, a medium risk, and then a higher risk. So the higher risk is mainly for the smaller drones, which are less powerful, obviously less likely to damage people or put people at risk. And you can operate anything that's kind of under 250 kilograms. And then eventually they're going to phase in these C-rated aircraft, which unfortunately haven't been released yet, and we don't have any kind of announcements on when they'll be released. But again, that's going to open up some really interesting projects for people where we can potentially fly a lot closer. So that would include kind of any aircraft which is under 250 grams or a C0 rated aircraft. And then we've got the second category, which is a little bit more risky, but what we can do is get our A2 CFC, and that allows us to operate within that certain category with an aircraft which is potentially a little bit heavier. So that would be up to kind of 2 kilograms, something that's a little bit heavier. Obviously not going to cause a huge amount of risk, but there is a bit of risk there. So that's going to basically mean we need a little bit more training. We need to understand how to do a risk assessment, potentially do a bit of pre-planning as well. But mainly you're going to have to go through a process which allows you to run through a checklist and basically self-certify yourself as being a competent pilot. And then we've got the category above that, which is really low risk, like we say, 150 meters away from people. And that is where you can operate a heavier aircraft without having to go through your A2 CFC. In terms of the actual courses themselves, there are some differences. I'd say the GVC is a little bit more in-depth, but the main difference that you're going to go through is the fact that the exam's a little bit longer. So you've got 10 extra questions in the exam, and obviously you have to do a flight assessment as well. So you'll be out in the field with myself or one of the other instructors, running through how you would essentially set up for a job and how you'd fly your aircraft. We'll ask you to do some maneuvers, and then we would proceed to basically watch you complete that operation. With the A2 CFC, there is a course that you'd have to go through. This is mainly done online for us. And you would also sit an exam, which is 30 questions. So it's a little bit shorter than the GVC, which is 40. And then you would also have to complete your checklist to kind of certify that you're a safe pilot. So that's essentially going through a number of maneuvers, a number of different capabilities. And once you've kind of signed that off, you can get yourself booked in for your exam. And then once you've done that and passed your exam, you'll get your certificate, and there's no further requirement for you to apply for any sort of permission there, like we would do with the GVC, or if you've done your PFCO previously, the kind of way that works. So once you've got that certificate, you can start operating within the open category. And obviously with the GVC, once you've got your GVC certificate, then you would use that to apply for your permission. So hopefully I haven't confused you too much there. It is a little bit of a minefield. There are some differences, but the kind of main thing to remember is just that it's all done on risk. If you're doing a job which is going to be extremely risky, it's probably likely you're going to need a GVC. But if you're flying really far away from people, you can probably operate within the open category with no problems at all. So I hope that answered your question there. We will, I think we might have, Steve, are you still there, Steve?
Yes, I'm still here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I just lost your camera feed.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's a reasonable explanation. I mean, up to 250 grams, you'll find that the aircraft have very few limitations. You can pretty much do anything as long as you don't intentionally endanger somebody. So there are few restrictions. As soon as you go over that 250 grams, then you obviously have the distance restrictions. As Harry said, with the A1, A2, and A3 category: fly over, fly near, fly far, if you want to call them that. So obviously, and that's where the A2 CFC comes in. It allows you to fly the bigger drones closer to people, but be very careful because it's a horizontal separation with an A2 CFC. So you can fly 50 meters within 50 meters of a person, for example, but you can't fly 50 meters above them. It's the 50 meters is a cylinder because the CA talk about horizontal distance. The GVC turns that cylinder into a bubble, so you can fly 50 meters over the top of uninvolved people. So that's probably the major advantage of the GVC over the A2 CFC. The other thing is you operate to an operations manual, and you can do a risk assessment or operational safety case and put anything you want in your operations manual, and as long as the CEA accept it, then you can operate to those lower limits. So the GVC is a different animal altogether, because you have the ability to make a safety case and operate to much lower limits than even an A2 CFC. There is an element, a point at which it becomes very risky, and then you're getting into certified, and that tends to be with much bigger drones, and that are doing specialist activities. But the there will undoubtedly be a lot of certified drones and certified operators in the future, but they're relatively few and far between at the moment. So hopefully that hasn't caused that's kind of cleared up a little bit. But obviously, if you want to, feel free to contact us personally if you want us to kind of go through it a little bit more and clarify a little bit better. I guess I'll take the next question because I guess it's my kind of bag, really. Inform us about use in the agricultural sector. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I do. So I've got 3 drones, a couple of them behind me, but 3 drones which I use just for basically agricultural survey. So as I said, basically you really want the GVC for a start, because you don't want to be worrying about overflying people when you're doing an automated survey and the aircraft's tracking up and down. So first and foremost, you're going to want a GVC qualification, really. But then over and above that, yeah, get the right drone and the right equipment. I'll be honest, it's not cheap. A Microsense Red Edge MX, let alone an Ultim, is now running at about £5,000 or £6,000, and the Ultim's, I think, going out at about 12. You can run that in a dual camera setup if you want to, so that's obviously 2 times £12,000. You can get a bit of discount, but and then of course you need the drones to carry them, and because of the weight of the cameras and the equipment, then you're talking about a bigger and more expensive drone generally. So but it's there. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy it, doing the agricultural work. You obviously need the software as well, and Pix4D is what I use. I use Pix4D Fields, which is a great agricultural program for crunching the multispectral images and turning it into a map, of crop health, if you like, and that particular software will produce all the normal the normal outputs that farmers, etc., would require, and you can also it can also issue prescriptions, so the guys know where they need to fertilize, where they don't need to fertilize, where they might be have dry crop, where they've got healthy crop, and this is going to be a growth industry. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the farmers have used satellite for years, but obviously satellite, I mean, even the best satellites are only given 3 meter pixels. So I mean, it'll give you a rough idea of the crop health, but you won't get down to individual plants. With a drone and a decent multi-spectral camera, then you're down to 5 or 6 centimeters. So you're looking at the health of individual plants. So So that's great. I mean, what I love about it is I get to go and stand in a field in the sunshine and enjoy it. I'm not flying in the rain anyway, because most of the drones aren't IP rated to allow you to fly in the rain, and you're not going to get very good photographs. But personally, I think it's probably one of the nicest things to do with drones. But obviously, you'll all have your own opinions on that, and whether you're getting into inspection, pylons, wind turbines, roof inspections, real estate, whatever. There's a whole raft of things you can do with the drones which you'll enjoy, which I guess takes us to the next question about documentary films and such. You got any advice for that, Harry?
Yeah, spot on. So we've got a question from Jonathan just saying, do you have any advice in where's best to look for work in the outdoor industry with regards to being the drone pilot for documentary films and such? So really good question there. We did touch a little bit earlier on some of the sites that you can use. So there was Drone Register and AR Pass. There are a few other groups out there as well. It's definitely worth having a look on LinkedIn. There are loads of kind of commercial pilot groups out there. And one thing that I could probably recommend as well is joining up to the Copters Pilots group if you haven't already, which is on Facebook. And then we've also got, for anyone who's gone through any of the courses with us, the Copters Alumni, which is on LinkedIn. And quite often we'll post any jobs that we get through in there, but other drone pilots will post comments in there about kind of work that they've got going on as well. In terms of targeting that industry specifically, there's nothing that I've seen, but to be honest, I haven't been actively looking in that industry. So it's just worth doing a bit of research. I'd probably start off with LinkedIn and just seeing if there's anything out there, but you should be able to find a group, even if it's not specifically for that industry, that will advertise jobs within that area.
Yeah, I mean that type of industry, there are quite a number of very well-established film producers. I can think of I won't name names, but I can think of a couple off the top of my head. Yeah, LinkedIn's a good place to look, and and just Google. And I guess it's all about trying to realistically setting yourself up from scratch with zero experience is always going to be an uphill battle. So probably far better for you to try and get a job with an established drone operator that's doing that sort of work, and yeah, build it up from there. Once you've got a couple of years experience, if you want to set up on your own, go crack on and go and do it. So yeah,
even kind of approaching these more established companies that are already doing it, they might be looking for someone to work as an observer or a spotter. And it's kind of just a way to get your foot in the door, and then you could potentially build up your own client base from there, or potentially work alongside another company as a bit of a collaboration.
I mean, just be aware that shooting film footage requires a huge amount of skill. So you're going to have, otherwise, to get a good result. There's a way of flying. You never yaw the aircraft. It's a slightly different skill set to when you're doing your A2 CFC or your GVC. So I think it takes a lot of practice, and that's good advice from Harry. I mean, if you can get in with one of these companies, half the time they're going to need additional people to assist with the drones or to be observers or whatever. You get your foot in the door at a low level, and once you've got that contact, you can obviously build up from there, build up your experience, and obviously, get in doing something easy to begin with, and before you know it, you might be chasing cars on Top Gear or something. I don't know, but yeah, okay, fine. Right, next.
So we've got a question there which says, where do you practice, and are there designated areas? So that's again quite a good question. We're quite lucky where we're based because we've got kind of a relationship with one of the farmers on the outskirts of Leeds, and he kind of allows us to pretty much show up whenever we'd like and practice in an area which we'd kind of it's well outside of any congested areas. It's completely closed off because it's private land. It's literally within one of his fields, and we've got kind of no risk that anyone's going to enter into that area. So, I mean, one thing that I could potentially advise for you is approaching farmers or people who've got land in your area and potentially seeing if you can use some of their land. Sometimes people will let you do it for free. Other times they may charge you a small amount of money to do so. And obviously you can kind of weigh that up and see how, or see if it's worth it for yourself. I do know quite a few people who will use local model aircraft clubs to practice as well. They have specific areas, they've got warnings in place to make sure that the environment's safe. And obviously there are certain times of the day that you can practice within those areas. So again, it might be worth having a look to see if there's any model aircraft clubs in your area. But outside of that, there are loads of places that you can operate safely. It's mainly just looking into it and kind of justifying it, making sure that you can do it safely. You've gone through potentially a risk assessment yourself, picked out a nice area that's far away from people. Depending on what aircraft you've got as well, you could potentially be a little bit closer. But yeah, you can operate in parks, any open areas. A lot of people will go down to the beach if they live near a beach and practice there. That's quite a good area because it's over the sea. Obviously, there's not a lot of chance that people are going to get in your way. But yeah, there are quite a lot of areas. But in terms of designated areas, it's probably going to be approaching somebody who's got a lot of land that you could potentially practice on, or getting in contact with your local model flying club.
Yeah, and that's what I did when I learned to fly. I approached a local farmer and asked if I could fly in his land, and he let me fly in 3 of his fields. So you know, so I just as long as I let him know when I was going there and how long I was going to be, you know, no problem, and that worked. It was ideal for me. So you know, that's probably the best idea. I noticed the next one's about cities. If it's not I mean, obviously in cities like London, huge amounts of the area are restricted. And if you want to fly in any of those restricted areas, let alone the flight restriction zones, then you have to have permission. You're talking about putting in a non-standard flight request, which you're not going to get realistically if you're not qualified already. So if you've already got a GVC and you want to do an item of work, then obviously, you know, the chances are you will get permission. But there's a whole lot of stuff going on in London. So I think the question is depends where it is. Any city is the same. Depends where it is. You need to be using drone safety map or something like that, figuring out whether you're in a restricted area or not. We as a company use a system called Drone Desk, which works exactly the same, gives us the same information. We can go on to any site we want, and it'll, you know, and literally safety assess all of the risks before we even get on site, and then we still do a site survey when we get there. But yeah, it's just very much you know, avoiding the restricted areas, finding somewhere where you can. I believe, I'm not an expert on London, but I believe Richmond Park you can fly. Now, if it's below 250 grams, generally speaking, you haven't got a problem other than local hostility. You haven't got a problem legal-wise. If it's a bigger drone, then obviously you've really got to be careful about the 50 meters, because otherwise you will get your collar felled, which is why somewhere out the city, a farmer's field, you know, with a nice man or lady that'll let you fly in his field or her field, would be much better. So there you go.
Yeah. One thing to remember there as well is the majority of areas you can actually fly in, but it's all about going through the right process of approval, speaking to the right people, doing the correct planning, and obviously proving that you're going to be safe. And doing your GVC is probably one of the easiest ways to do that. I mean, we've had permission to fly kind of just outside an FRZ, right at the end of one of the airports in London, which we kind of did as a bit of a test, just to go through the process ourselves and figure it out. And they did give us approval, but obviously we had to submit our certificates that we got. So at the time it was the PFCO, so we had our certificates of competency from the NQE or the NQEs that we went through, our PFCO, obviously the proof that we got permission to fly commercially. We submitted a risk assessment, quite a lot of planning detail, planning information, and then they basically gave us permission to fly under certain conditions and limitations, and also specified that we had to basically call them before we take off and after we've landed as well. So there is ways that you can do it, but just make sure you're going through the correct pathway. And if you're unsure if you've got the correct permission, it's always safer just not to take off at all.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, and that was just, as far as I remember, that was just off runway 27 right at Heathrow. So you couldn't be in a worse place to do a roof inspection. And I think the permission was below 80 feet with the caveats that Harry gave. So, you know, it's possible to get permission to fly almost anywhere, but you just have to be professional about it. You have to risk assess it. You have to present all of that stuff. You have to request permission. And if you don't, obviously, that's where you start to get into trouble. So, okay. The next question is another agricultural question. License, I think I've already mentioned that. I think really you're going to need a GVC because depending what type of drone you're flying, you know, we fly several different types. You know, my own drones, I fly Uniques, the 520 and the 520E. But obviously, you can use the bigger drones, matrices. We have a Wingtra, which you can use with the microsense cameras, and you can do about 5 kilometers square in a day with that, which is brilliant. You know, in a relatively small amount of time. So, as far as appropriate drone type, there's a whole raft of different drones that are all appropriate. As I said, generally it tends to be the bigger ones because you need a drone that will take you can change the payload on because it's a non-standard payload. So that generally is going to push you towards a bigger drone. And then obviously, to be honest, the likes of the microsense, unless you're going to plug it into the drone power, which I try to avoid, then you're going to need a drone that can carry 500 or 600 grams of payload, which yet again pushes you into the 2.5 kilo plus drone range, so or bigger, you know. And obviously, if a Matrice 300 would easily carry a microsense camera, and obviously so will the likes of the Wingtra, you know, which has been a fixed wing drone, can cover huge amounts of ground very quickly, very accurately. You know, but of course it all comes at cost, so it all depends on your budget as well. And software, I think I've already mentioned, there's a few different types of software you can use. I use Pix4D Fields, but there are a few different ones you can use.
Yeah, I mean,
we do a course for that as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of add to that, I think it all depends on the operation that you're doing, the safety of it, the aircraft that you're using. It would probably take a bit of research, a bit of planning, just to see which category it would kind of fit into. But there's potential. I mean, the easiest way is just to go ahead and do your GVC, but there could be ways that you could do it under your A2 CFC, or potentially just in the A3 subcategory as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very, very dependent on the job there, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A couple of question there about silly questions from beginners. There's no such thing as a silly question. If you have a question, ask it, and you'll get a sensible answer. So, as far as who to ask, you know, feel free to email us afterwards or message us, etc. That's fine. I'm pretty sure there are probably links somewhere with regard. And if that doesn't work, just email training@COPTRZ.com, and you know, we'll answer you. Try and help you in any which way we can. Drone good for somebody just beginning, Harry? Individual choice, I think, really.
Yeah, I mean, really good question. There's obviously a lot of drones. There's a lot of drones out there now. There's some of the smaller aircraft are probably better to start on, something like a Mavic Mini or potentially the Parrot and Nafi. Yeah, I mean, there's loads out there for beginners. I'd probably try and pick something smaller, something a little bit safer that you're not going to get yourself into too much trouble with. But I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't go for a larger aircraft as well. I know quite a lot of the people that I've flown with in the past have started off on things like the Phantoms, or even starting on the Inspires, which quite brave. But
yeah, I was going to say the Inspire is probably quite brave, but yeah, my first plane was a Phantom. Yeah, so you know, so yeah, I thoroughly enjoy the Phantom, and also the one thing about the Phantom, I still fly now because it has the ATI mode, so you can it gives you the opportunity to practice that. But it's also quite a serious drone as well. It's kind of the first of the consumer drones that you can kind of use professionally as well. So it gives you a little bit more, you know, it can. If you don't want to mount a Mini 2, then it obviously starts you off at a level at which you probably could make some money from it, i.e., you know, you've got a decent camera, you can shoot decent video, shoot decent photographs. You know, you're not struggling with signal. It's less likely to fly away on you than some of the smaller drones. So I think, you know, in some respects, the Phantom, I mean, that was my first drone. I think it was a good drone, and I still have one now. I've got a Phantom 4 version 2 now. So yeah, but whatever suits you really. There's a load.
Yeah, the Phantoms are kind of reliable aircraft. A lot of people will have started on those. But yeah, I mean, one thing I probably should have mentioned this earlier actually as well when we were talking about places to practice. One thing that we do at Copters is when we're trying to get our pilot hours up or trying to improve our ATI skills, we'll use a toy drone such as the one that I use is a Hubston, which is kind of a really small little drone. No special features to it at all. It's literally just 4 propellers attached to a remote controller, and it's really challenging to fly. Way harder than any of the kind of DJI kit that you'd get, but obviously super small, and it basically just flies in ATI mode as well. So you're upping your skills really, really quickly, but you can obviously do it in a safe environment because they're built pretty much to operate inside. Most of them will come with prop guards as well. You can fly them around your living room or office, wherever you want to fly them. And obviously you can build your skill up that way, and it's only going to cost you between kind of 20 to 40 pounds, which in the grand scheme of the drone industry isn't a huge amount really.
Yeah, no, exactly. The Hubsan, yeah, is a you know, I mean, you can't really do anything with it other than practice your flying skills. But I think because it has no GPS, because it has no toys, of course, you know, it is very good at developing your hand-eye coordination and building those skills. And for the day when your Phantom or whatever you've got decides that it can't see any satellites anymore and it doesn't have GPS, so you know, it's going to be less of a drama. Question about flyer ID and operator ID, the same as A2 CFC. I'm not really sure what that means, but flyer ID and operator ID are quite straightforward. Everybody needs an operator ID, doesn't matter what you fly. You've got to apply for an operator ID. If you're operating anything over 250 grams, you need a flyer ID and an operator ID. Personally, I think it's more hassle to apply for an operator ID than just do the test and get both. That's my personal opinion. You know, it takes about 10 minutes to do the test, and you get both, and then you don't have to worry about putting prop guards on your Mini 2 or whatever, because you're already cleared to fly above 250 grams. So and there's no difference. The A2 CFC, it's all to do with the size of the drone you're flying. Flyer ID and operator ID, it's got nothing to do with the qualification as far as that's concerned. So I hope that answers that question. Another Camellia talking about silly questions yet again. Refer to my previous answer. No such thing. Send us an email with whatever questions you've got, or feel free. We can have an open room after this. I think there's a link where you can go to offline too, so we can have a chat offline once the presentation finishes as well. What else have we got? Yeah, there's Harvey. Do you want to take that? I think he addressed it to you anyway, Harry.
Oh yeah, so Harvey's asked, I bought 80 acres of land at 1,200 meters above sea level in Class D, local to Edinburgh Airport, and want to survey the land. Although I have my PFCO, what paperwork would I need to put through, if any? So, good question there. With regards to Class D airspace, it's one of the airspaces that we're allowed to fly in as drone pilots without any prior permission. Although it is recommended that we contact the ATC before taking off to inform them of the flight. Obviously, that's dependent on where you're flying. We do quite a lot of flying in Class D, actually. The area that we use to practice and do a lot of flight tests in our Leeds locations actually in Class D airspace. And occasionally, depending on the aircraft that we're flying or the kind of work that we're doing, we will contact the ATC before, and they essentially just ask us to let them know when we're taking off and let them know when we've finished. But there's quite often occasions where we don't ring them at all, and we're obviously perfectly within our rights to do that as well. It sounds like it would be a fairly safe place to kind of survey that land, but obviously it depends on the specific area itself. Without looking at it, it's quite a difficult question to give you a definitive answer on, but by the sounds of it, you would be okay to fly there. I'd just maybe think about anything in the surrounding area that could potentially affect the flight. But yeah, good question there.
Yeah, and I think any time I was flying in Class D, I would speak to the airfield, because whilst you know you're not going to be, you shouldn't infringe on them at all, you can always get a flyaway. So if they know where you are in the first place and what you're doing, when you give them a ring and say my drone just disappeared off the top of the hill over the top of the hill in your direction, at least they're kind of semi-prepared. So personally, I would tend to, but you know,
yeah, it's definitely
there's no legal requirement. Harry's absolutely right. So okay, drone operator being paid per day. Well, yeah, it's very difficult, really. It depends who you're working for and what you're doing. It's as simple as that. You could find it's anything from a couple £100 a day to £600 or £700 a day, depending what work you're doing. I would say with drone operator, you know, it's value. You're selling value, so you know you're not necessarily always charging a daily rate. You know, if you're doing a job with a drone that would have taken take a surveyor, you know, 3 days to do with a total station, then you're saving a fortune. You know, so you can afford to you know charge a little bit more for your time than a basic daily rate. So obviously if you're working as a freelance contractor for a drone operator, then they're going to come up with a daily rate. But I to be honest, I wouldn't like to put a figure on that, because it's going to depend on the operator and it's going to depend what they're doing. Would you agree with that, Harry?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've obviously got less experience within the commercial flying, but yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And the last question, and somebody mentioned Drone Safe Register earlier on. Can you build a portfolio? You know what? I registered with Drone Safe Register when I first started. I have no problems with them. I can't say they've driven a lot of business my way just because of what I started doing. It's a bit of a specialist business. So when you're dealing with agronomists, which obviously is guys that do crop health, you know, they tend not to trawl for operators on Drone Safe Register. But obviously, if you know, there's lots of different jobs out there. So if you're doing roof inspections or you're doing you know, state agency work, then I think it probably has a value. So I think it depends what you're going to do and to make an assessment whether it's worth it. I think it's about a couple £100 to register with Drone Safe Register. You can, if you gold certify, you know, at least you've got a nice sticker you can stick on your website. You know, it kind of, you have to prove to them that you're certified, qualified, and I don't think you have to prove that you're competent, but you certainly have to prove your qualifications. So it does give a little bit of credibility to begin with. I think once you've been going for a while, then hopefully if you do a good job, your competence will be spread by word of mouth, not through, I would suggest, the Drone Safe Register. But you know, it's a good place to start. So that's it really.
Yeah.
And
I think kind of one thing I'd probably add to that is obviously there are quite a lot of groups out there, quite a lot of different organizations where you can put your name on a board and kind of hopefully pick up business there. But I think it obviously takes quite a lot of work to build up your client base. Jamie, who's one of the strategists at Copters, spends quite a lot of time speaking to people on kind of how to set the businesses up and the type of activities that they should be doing. And I think a lot of it is kind of just calling out to companies that are within those industries that you want to work in, getting in contact with them on LinkedIn, trying to get through to them on the phone when you can, sending out emails, and I guess kind of being a little bit of a pest for a while and just trying to get in contact with as many people as you can and building that network really. I don't think there's kind of a quick fix to putting your name on a board and suddenly receiving loads of clients. But yeah, it's definitely worthwhile kind of putting the work into your networking and trying to build that kind of by approaching them individually.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. There was one, is there any organization to fly here and let's say the US? I'm assuming you're talking about effectively having one license that covers all, and the quick answer, I think, to that one is no, to be honest. If you fly in the US, then there's the FAA have a completely different qualification system for drones. I don't know.
I mean, I've with my experience, it kind of depends country to country. There's so many different organizations and authorities out there that control various different bits of airspace, and it really just depends on the country that you go into. If you went to America, you'd have to get in contact with the FAA, and I'm not sure on the specific process for that. But I mean, I've worked in places where they've just asked for proof of my certification, and they've given me kind of like a temporary permission to operate. But there's been places that you can go to where you have to just go through the whole process again and essentially do the equivalent of the GVC or the A2 CFC in that country itself. So there's no kind of blanket answer to that, unfortunately, and there isn't anything that you can do in the UK to train yourself to have kind of a gold card to operate anywhere. But yeah, you'd have to just kind of do your research depending on the region or the country that you're operating within.
Yeah, and you don't have to go that far. For example, I used to live in the Isle of Man, and if you go to the Isle of Man, they have effectively their own kind of mini drone CAA and a different set of rules. And well, I mean, roughly it's along the lines of the A2 CFC GVC. They recognise those qualifications, but if you want to fly in lots of areas over there, you still have to apply to them to do it. You don't get automatic carte blanche by having a UK CAA qualification, if you know what I mean. So it's yeah, you just got to be a little bit careful when you go away off your beaten track. So yeah, that's it. I think that's it. There was one living of what sort of things farms need to be done with the drone. Most of it's crop health survey. So farmers are constantly looking at their, whether it's grass, for livestock, or whether it's actual crop, winter barley or whatever. They're wanting to check the health of the soil, check the health of the plants as they're growing, decide where they need to fertilize. If there are droughted areas, what parts where they need to think about some sort of irrigation or something to get more water in or whatever. So so literally you go up and you fly and you can see how healthy the crop is, using things like NDVI. So it literally just it looks at the chlorophyll level in the plants and obviously allows the farmers to say, well, that field is healthy, that part of the field is healthy, that part isn't. So that's generally the things that they're wanting to be done by drones. So and obviously you just need the kit to do it. But as I said, it's not particularly cheap to get it. But it's definitely going to be I think a growth industry over years to come. So that's it. I think we're out of questions. I noticed on the chat, Harvey asked something about. I'm assuming it was referred to me about Farming World who needs help or something. Anyway, look, feel free to contact us, at COPTRZ CON, either via the training or via our personal emails. So if you need any assistance, we're always here to help. And obviously as well, if you're trying to get into those sort of games, then obviously people like Jim Pick, who's our surveying expert, is your go-to man to give you as additional technical advice on what you need and that sort of thing. So feel free to use the resources that are there.
Good stuff.
Okay, I think that's about it. Okay, have we got? Oh, we might have just had another question. Camellia, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. So as a matter of fact, actually, I think somewhere in the on the links there's a link to an offline meeting room. So I think we can obviously drop off this call now, this webinar, and obviously go to that room if you want to, or we can chat over the next couple of days if that's not convenient. So not a problem at all.
Yeah, I mean, probably the best way to get in contact with us is just using the Copters email address, so info@Copters, obviously asking to speak to the training team, and you'll get put, that email gets sent straight on to us, and we can kind of help assist you there. It's probably worthwhile going to that rather than contacting us individually, because especially in the training team, we're all kind of like in and out of the office, and it might take us quite a while to get back to you. But if you send it over to info, it'll get kind of filtered through, and someone who's in the office or has access to their emails will obviously get back to you as soon as they can. But I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's joined today and obviously been on the previous webinars that have run out through the day. There's been some really, really good questions, and I can obviously see there's loads of knowledge coming through here as well. But yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant to kind of be involved with answering those questions and speaking to everyone who's joined. So just a massive thank you there.
Yeah, and thanks for those questions as well. I mean, bearing in mind, I think we've got about 40 odd people. I think we had a few more at one point on the call, but to get so many questions and people asking good questions, is definitely useful. That's brilliant. Okay, great. Okay, well, I mean, I think unless anybody has any other questions, we'll call it a day at that. As Harry said, thanks for joining. If you need more information, you can always email the training team at the info address, and obviously also, as I mentioned in the webinar, you've got the individual strategists that can help you as well, depending on what sort of game or job that you're wanting to get into with within the drone industry. Right. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys.